Father Brian, tell me about the book.
It's a book that had a long history of gestation, you might say. A few years ago, in 2006, a Jesuit in Singapore called Philip Heng produced a similar book, and that landed on the desk of the Partners for Mission office in the Jesuit provincial headquarters. And that office looks after the induction of people who come to work in Jesuit apostolates in the province. And immediately they sensed that a book like this would be very helpful in the induction program, if you like, where these new people would be introduced to the ethos and the spirituality that lay behind the work of any particular institution. So primarily this book is geared at that readership, and then by extension it was seen that groups like, say, the parents in our colleges would be able to benefit from it as well, because they too need to know something about the ethos of the schools. I always had an even wider perspective. I always felt that the writing that I was doing would be accessible to people outside of the Ignatian or the Jesuit family altogether. So that would still be my hope. It's a book that falls into two parts. The earlier part is a bit more structured, if you like. It starts with the person of Ignatius, who is the basis of all that followed from that, and then reflects on his spiritual experience and what he did with that. And then it ends with a chapter on mission. And that is a very up-to-date presentation of how Jesuits see mission today, with the stress on its universality, so the international dimension, and on its corporateness, the fact that we work together as a body and not as individuals. The second part then is a reproduction of some of articles that I wrote for The Messenger in a series on Ignatian Spirituality a couple of years ago. And that takes a different approach. The title kind of gives an indication of that, Windows into Ignatian Spirituality. So instead of working through the history of it, as in the first part, we're looking at it as it is today, but from different aspects. And that really is, I think, a good way. It's not maybe a technical way, but it's a good way of getting some resonance from the readers in the contemporary scene. So I would think that in an ideal world that the very last page has reference to two resources that are available to people who are perhaps interested or have been touched or have been moved by what they have read, namely the availability in the province of Ignatian retreats and the availability of an Ignatian style of spiritual direction or spiritual accompaniment. So if even some of those people who will read this book end up by looking for either of those retreats or directions, then I would be more than happy.
And you might just say one thing, Brian. It's not a long book, you know. It's just if somebody that it's very. Let me just say it's very readable. It's not a long book. It's very readable, and lots of illustrations as well. Maybe just some for people who would know that. So.
Yes.
Would that be all right? It is an introduction. So you could just say this book is an introduction, so it's not a long book. Would that be? Would you just add that in?
Okay. This is an introductory book because I don't presume that readers have any prior knowledge of Ignatian spirituality or of the history of the Jesuit order or anything of that kind. So it's there being presented in a fairly simple way. I've tried not to what shall we say, downsize the material too much in making it simple or accessible. But I think I have managed to maintain, if you like, the integrity of the spiritual message, while making it easy for people to read. And of course, I am delighted with the presentation of the book. I mean, any author will always be pleased when the text is surrounded by attractive photographs and paintings, and the overall presentation and the graphics are very attractive, and that gives me a kind of an added pleasure to